will find you. And I will kill you.
I'm the longest. Shut the fuck up, Donnie.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me. Aren't you?
Was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? Hell no!
Just been revoked.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
You want answers! I want the truth! You can't handle the truth! Because it is my name!
I see dead.
Today, Junior?
You ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight? What?
You'll shoot your eye out, kid.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
The price is wrong, bitch.
All right. Welcome to Critics Not Cynics, the podcast that tries to prove that you can be a critic without being a cynic. And this week, again, we are back as we obviously took a little bit of a break there from, for at least for a week. We're back with episodes 3 and 4 review for Hawkeye. I'm just letting everything play out here. Just start getting that down. And as always, I am joined by Leslie. Leslie, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Still learning a little bit with OBS there. So yes, we're back this week. As I said in the live stream of the Ascent that we did with Johnny, we had a weird gap of where you and I were talking and like Pat and I were talking. And we're like, we have nothing to cover this week. So we took a little break. We didn't have anything like super planned or anything for that, and it was nice, no one weekend to kind of just do the live stream and not have to worry about editing any material. But we're back, and I think next week we'll have some form of a Spider-Man review out for everyone, and hopefully Leslie will get a chance to join us, but maybe not. We'll see how her schedule goes. I know she's got a pretty crazy one here. So let's just go ahead and dive into it. Little forewarning and precursor to this review. We're not really treating this as kind of two individual episodes because they pretty much bookmark each other, or bookend each other rather, very well. That it's kind of hard to differentiate where one leaves off and the other one starts because they really kind of run into each other. And of course, spoilers, more spoilers
always.
Specifically for episode 4 than episode 3, since episode 3 has been out for a while, but just get that out there, since we're talking about the plot and the story details. So, again, I know we try to structure our reviews, but with TV shows, it's a little bit harder, especially depending on, when someone watched what and what our memories have retained from information. So for a little scattershot, that's probably my fault more than Leslie's. So, all right, episode 3.
Yeah.
Echoes.
Yeah.
Very good episode in general. I liked it. It had probably out of the two episodes, I think I had a little bit more issues with episode 4 than episode 3. Not anything that breaks the show for me or anything like that, but just some little nitpicks. One thing I said before we started recording, if they had maybe just combined these two episodes into one big episode, or maybe shortened episode 3 and front-loaded episode 4 with a few more minutes of the end of episode 3, it may have evened out a little bit better. But this episode's a very fun episode. Very action-packed. I think a lot of criticisms I heard of the first two episodes were that it wasn't stuff that they were seeing in the trailers, like primarily the car chase scenes and some more archery focused action-packed sequences.
Like he's an archer character. People want to see people, shoot arrows and things. So
right, and so I think that was kind of their complaint, and I think this episode obviously alleviates it. It's a little bit more action heavy. A lot of fight choreography, and because it's an episode that when I started, I'm like, okay, it's 42 minutes, and then I got to the end, and I'm like, that's it.
It's over.
Like, it moved so quickly, and not in a negative way. It was just, it had me so into what was happening on the screen that I just didn't realize the time had passed.
Yeah, and I like that episode 3. I feel like establishing characters as we go. So like we said, episode 1 was like really focused on Kate. Episode 2 looked at Clint. Episode 3 starts right out like telling us about Maya and her backstory. So it doesn't look like a Widow backstory, but that's fine.
Yeah,
that was like a low priority prediction. If
well,
you didn't stick around for predictions,
and considering with what we get in episode 4.
Right. So I actually like that. I believe I don't know which article that I read, but that they wanted a deaf actress, and she just so happened to have a prosthetic leg, and they just built that into the character for her instead of like, trying to work around it or hide it or things like that. So I like that they did that, that they didn't hide away from that. Yeah,
and this actress's I'm sorry, I don't have her name right in front of me. Alakwa Cox, if I'm butchering that, so
I don't
apologies.
Have their name up.
But this, I think, is like her first role in any acting role in any gig, and I thought she did fantastic. A lot. She did really well with emoting, and when she's signing, like having her face match the emotion she was trying to convey through sign, and so I think she blew me away. Because when you get at the end of episode 2, you only get that one little scene with her where she, brushes him off, and that's it.
Yeah.
So we have no idea who she is, why she's got this, bee in her bonnet for Ronan, and this episode does a really good job. So not only being Maya focused, because we get a lot of kind of her backstory and her motivation for why she's coming after Ronan, but also doing what we thought it would do, showing more of a mixed Clint and Kate relationship developing. And because like even when he manages to get off the horse, she thinks he's abandoned her, and yet he's like getting everything, and then he does that really cool precise arrow shot, and she's like,
into the ball pit.
Yeah. Oh God. So
yeah.
I can't remember if I've mentioned this movie in the prior episode of the podcast, but I know I told you about it. The movie Tag. Jeremy Renner is in it, and that ball pit scene is very reminiscent of Tag. Just like this most ridiculous set piece played so seriously, and just how you can enjoy the fact that it's a man that is stealthily going through a ball pit, and the two guys not knowing where he is, and him coming up like Rambo and pinning them to the sides of it. It was just very, very funny and very well done. Go ahead.
Before we skip too far into the episodes, though, when we are getting Maya's backstory, if you pay close attention, you notice her dad's wearing a tracksuit.
Yes.
So that's one hint that you get. But when she's at her karate classes, I think everybody and their brother who's into the Marvel Defenders, the Netflix shows and stuff, all went, is that who we think it is? When they said Uncle's going to take you home, and you see his cufflink or whatever, and he pinches her cheek, and it kind of sounds like maybe that's Kingpin?
Yeah. We don't know. But considering the recent news that Feige has pretty much stated that if, when, and where, and how Daredevil enters into the MCU, it will be Charlie Cox from the Netflix shows. So there's also holding out that hope that Vincent D'Onofrio will be allowed to return as Kingpin, because his Kingpin is fantastic. And that's one of the detriments of the Netflix shows. Not to derail into those a little bit, but I know you asked the very interesting question of will they be multiversal or what?
Yeah.
Like, or are they going to retroactively say that they're actually a part of the MCU?
Yeah, so like once, Kevin Feige had said that, because before he had very clearly stated they are not part of the canon.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, well, now that you
Yeah.
have the whole multiverse thing going on, can you retroactively say, okay, they're part of the canon now, but it's a multiverse, so the characters are similar that are in the main line, but not entirely the same, so you can still get money and whatnot and everything from those shows, even though you're probably not going to continue them,
Right.
or continue them in that same way. Or are they going to bring them in? I don't know if they would bring them in 100%, but it'd be real easy for him to be like, oh, well, it's a multiverse.
Well, so, because this was, and I think I told you this a few years ago, primarily when Luke Cage Season 2 had premiered on Netflix, because it was kind of an issue I had with the Netflix shows and whether or not, because they originally were planned to be part of the MCU, because if you go into Season 1 of Daredevil, they're referencing Thor, they're referencing Iron Man, and then those references go away,
Yeah.
But the only thing that is like a staple of a reference within the Netflix Marvel shows is the Battle of New York. So my guess is if they want to envelop those and keep, Mike Coulter and Kristen Ritter and all of them that were in the Netflix shows, and enfold them over into the actual mainline MCU, they just need to say, because I was always wondering, well, when, have they reached the Sokovia Accords yet? Like, has Ultron attacked or anything? Because that's never mentioned. So if you say that the Netflix shows all take place in between Battle of New York and before Age of Ultron, there's some little references to like actual live action shows, like This Is Us is referenced in Season 2 of Luke Cage, which was what bothered me, because I'm like, well, you're not telling me when you're actually setting these, and This Is Us is a current day show rather than, it being back when Avengers happens. How you would necessarily rectify it, but it would be their easiest way to say those shows all take place before Age of Ultron, and then anything that happens once now they're officially enfolded into the MCU will be post and up to date and current. So we'll see what route they take. It's going to be interesting. I'm just very happy to hear that, because I think Charlie did a great job as Matt, and I liked a lot of the people they had for the Netflix shows. I think they all did a fantastic job. Even Finn, what's his name, who was in Game of Thrones, who played Danny Rand. I know a lot of people weren't thrilled with his performance, but I thought he was fine. But that's a conversation for another day. We'll get back on track here with with the Hawkeyes episodes.
Yeah, that was just definitely something that everybody, watching, latched onto that, and they were like, it's Kingpin, and everybody's oohing and on and freaking out.
So then, of course, also in Maya's flashback, we see that Ronan, kills her father, and that is why she is on her revenge path. Does go ahead.
Make her? I was just
No, you're fine.
thinking, like, I don't know if it necessarily makes her purely villain now, because that's a really good reason to hate somebody.
Right.
Is this person, Ronan, even though she doesn't know who it is, killed her dad. She was a child. Maybe at the point that she was young adult, does she know more about, the criminal activity that they do?
Right.
But you killed my dad is a pretty darn good reason to be, like, on the warpath hunting somebody.
Well, considering she's going to have her own show
here
down the road, I think she might come along the lines of maybe being a little bit of an anti-hero, where she's a good guy, sort of, but, a Venom, like what have you, where they, they don't play by the rules, but they do try to help people. Because, like, I don't get that that vibe off of her. I think she is just purely on to a straight revenge path right now.
Yeah, that's really what it feels like.
Mirrors, like, I think that this will be something that will hopefully kind of come to fruition in episodes 5 and 6. Mirrors Ronan or Hawkeye's path between Endgame and Infinity War and Endgame.
Well, that's interesting because I thought it mirrors a lot of like Nat's thing with needing revenge on what's his name? Dreykov. And, and then finally getting to, of course, she does try to kill it and kills him, but Hawkeye having to make the call to not kill you.
Yeah.
Like, I thought there might be something there for them. So when we see Yelena, that might have an influence on her making the not shoot call sort of a thing.
Could
like
be.
Seeing this, I don't know, just lots of interesting things playing out.
Yeah, I think because I think it's a whole mirroring thing where it's his family was taken, so he in turn not knowingly took her family, the most important person in her life, and now she's on that kind of solitary mission. And I liked her relationship with her second in command, Kazi. I really liked that, not only is he her interpreter, because that could simply be just what it is, but it's actually someone she trusts, even though she disregards what he says. He even goes, it's just us. You can talk to me, and no one else is going to know. And I'm trying to not let you.
These idiots haven't learned ASL.
and trying not to let it consume her. He sees that it's consuming her. It's becoming her just only path that she's willing to travel.
White whale.
Yes, exactly. So there are a lot of those character moments that I think are perfect in this. In episode 3, the complaint being, we didn't get to see him do a whole lot of actiony sequences. Well, here it is. Even though there is one very bad, and I don't know if you picked up on it, and just because I have my own green screen, there's one really bad green screen moment in that car chase. It's near the end of the chase, but I was just like, ooh, you couldn't have fine-tuned that just a little bit more. But I think my favorite part out of that whole chase scene was the Pym arrow.
Yes.
Because I was like, oh, that's cool. That's cool. It's funny. It's awesome.
Every reactor I watched when it got to that scene was like, like for anybody listening on audio, it's the oh my god face, just the wow.
It was fantastic.
Yeah, because one of the reactors I watched, they said, they were into it, but they were needing that little bit of more action, and that episode 3 gave them that, and they were just like, wow, when they did the Pym arrow, they were like, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen. I don't know if they'd done that in the comics or not, but everybody was generally consensus that was pretty darn cool. Yeah,
it was awesome. I really enjoyed it. And of course, I also love the whole bit, when they escape and she wants to take the Charger or challenge or whatever.
Challenge, yeah.
And he's like, I'm not smashing the window of that. And then by the end of it, he's like, and it still gets destroyed.
Smashed, yeah.
So it was really good. And then we get some really good fun moments between Kate and Clint because his hearing aid gets destroyed. And they're having two very different conversations at the same time, and just that whole back and forth is really fantastic. And then pretty much the episode just kind of wraps up with them going to look more into the tracksuit mafia, finding out what connections they have, while also trying to look into Jack. She expresses her suspicions of Jack. And if you stuck around for Leslie's predictions for what's going to happen, I feel like they've planted a seed that she may be correct in that prediction. And we won't reiterate it per se. But if you want to, go check out our last episode and skip to the end. Because there was a wink and a nod, basically, to what Leslie had said, where, Clint's like, it seems a little too on the nose, but let's gather more evidence to prove what you're saying.
Yeah, let's see what's going on.
And then that's basically where the episode ends.
Well, because they're in the house.
Right.
And he hears something and goes to walk back the hall. And, of course, that's when we see the sword at his throat. And then it just cuts.
Right.
So when we get to 4, it picks up literally right there.
Exactly. And
that's why these two kind of go right together. It could have been one big episode.
Absolutely. Or they could have even gotten past the whole family conversation and cut it there and then picked up afterwards. That's what I'm saying. They could have either shortchanged one or shortchanged the other and thrown it on there. in reality, or they could have just meshed it together as one episode. But we get a nice little fun iteration. Like Jack even fanboys a little bit when he's like, "Oh, the Archer!"
The Archer.
And you know, we get the little bit of interrogation from the mom, and
also lending credence to my theory.
Yes, because she's
and
there's a little sus.
Yeah, and there's another spot. Pretty much, I feel like it's the scene when we go back to her, like right after this.
Mm-hmm.
She's making a phone call.
Oh, yes, that's right.
And because she makes that phone call, somebody shows up later. That's my guess.
Right. Yes, you are pretty much spot on that. And
I don't think she calls her directly. I can't remember her name.
The Contessa.
Yeah, that's it.
We'll just call her the Contessa.
Contessa. Yeah, she calls her.
Yeah.
That's why I'm like 100%. She calls her, and that's why certain someone shows up.
That would be interesting because that would bookmark with the post-credit scenes of Black Widow. Because
except for the weather. So I feel like
but they're in Ohio, and you know Ohio is very weird with its.
She wears shorts.
Yeah, she's Russian.
That's true. This isn't cold.
But who knows? I mean, it would kind of, or at least like with that post-credit scene. And then getting the phone call being like, you know, here he is, here's his location.
Yeah, that's what I felt like.
So you know, it could be either or, and but yeah, it was that I actually had kind of forgotten about that phone call. But then this is kind of where I just watched it, so forgive me for like I didn't get a chance to rewatch it, but my mind goes a little bit fuzzy on kind of the events that happen in between. I know Clint. Kind of is dealing with his
hearing aid fix.
Yes.
They have breakfast. They have that
she tries to come up
issue.
with his costume, and it's the original like Hawkeye design
with the H and everything.
And I love his whole point of my wife would divorce me. It was fantastic.
Yeah, he tries to tell her a little bit there about like to get her to think about the things that you lose, like the toll that something like that would have on you. But she's still in that young gun.
Well, and she's in that, you know, it's the honeymoon phase. It's very much like I'm doing it. I'm here with my hero. Like, again, kind of approaching it from that young mindset of I'm invincible. You know, like nothing's going to hurt me. I can take on the world. And, you know, we get some moments later on where it gets a little dire, and that's why Clint gets a little more overprotective. Especially this episode does, I think, a really good job with dealing with his PTSD. PTSD, sorry. It's been a long day, been a long week. PTSD, and he you know, is flashing back to Nat and Vormir, and really having a difficult time dealing with that and opening up to a new partner. Which is that's the name of the episode is Partners, right?
Partners. Yeah.
And it really is focusing on that. And he sends her on a little side mission to go meet the LARPers.
Yeah. Recollect the arrows.
Get the arrows, and now I know because they find out like Sloan Incorporated or whatever the kind of whole a shell company that the Tracksuit Mafia is working under.
He'd given that to Laura, to his wife, and then she sends him the text.
And it turns out to be that Jack Duquesne is the like CEO or whatever.
Yeah, but while they get that while they're all the LARPers and everything are in the apartment. So while she's going to get the LARPers, that's when he talks to Kazi. Yeah. You know.
Oh, yes. He has that. Yes.
He has that, you know, get her to understand that it's a white whale. It's never going to happen. You know, you got to get her off this track. And I think he even alludes to, like, you know, you don't want so-and-so to know with Uncle, you know, him to find out, you know, what's going on. Because you're supposed to be keeping a low profile or whatever. And he has that talk to him. And then, of course, can I have my gun back? And he's, nope, and he chucks it. So, like, while he's doing that, she's meeting the LARPers, which is great. I love that they're, like, exercising, but then he's like, ice wall, you know, with his staff and everything. Like, it's fantastic. Yeah. And I feel like Kate is a little kind of like, this is ridiculous, but then it's like, Kate, you're wearing, you know, an outfit as well and also shooting arrows.
Right. Well, I think she ends up like endearing, like falling in love with them a little bit and their enthusiasm.
Yeah, because when they all come back to the apartment, like Grills is making snickerdoodles, she's trying on outfits with the Viking girl.
Right.
You know, and that's when he gets the text from Laura about the Sloan LTD and whatnot, and he's like, we, you know, got something to do, and she goes with him.
Before we get jump a little bit, or before we go a little bit further in this episode, I would be remiss if I don't talk about the one really emotional scene in episode 3 that I kind of forgot about, and yeah, it was, I believe it was episode 3, might have been episode 4, where when he doesn't have the hearing aid, and Nate calls.
Oh, Nate calls, yeah.
And Kate is there to kind of help interpret, you know, because he knows he can't hear, and he's trying to talk. That was a fantastic scene.
Yeah, it was
very,
really well done.
Very beautiful scene. You know, just again him trying to balance the family life while taking kind of responsibility for, you know, his actions for Endgame.
Things I've done.
Yeah. And again, kind of furthering on to trying to impart upon Kate the toll and the cost and what this could lead to if things go wrong. So I wanted to make sure we did highlight that moment, because that was a very, very well done scene, both very competently acted between Haley and Jeremy Renner. So getting back on the track,
is it the text about the company, or was it the text about the watch? Maybe it was the watch.
Well, I thought they talked about the watch.
Well, but she asks him about the watch. Laura does.
Yes. And
then she tracks down the GPS on it, and she sends him the address. This is where I'm getting a ping from it.
Yes. Okay. And that's kind of what leads to the finale of the episode.
Right.
Because that was one thing I didn't quite catch, and maybe I wasn't paying attention close enough. The watch, is that Clint's watch? Like, you know,
he told Kate it is a friend's watch that could reveal their identity. So if he doesn't get the watch back, it could be goodbye, friend. That's basically what he says.
Okay.
So I don't know whose watch it is. I saw a lot of people having theories of, like, is that Laura's watch somehow? Like, how does she have all this information? Like, she seems to be really plugged in. I don't have really any theories about that.
Yeah, because even when he picks it up, it has a tag on it, and it says Avengers Compound or something like that on there.
Yeah, they left. It's the same. It's the tag that was on it when they picked it up in episode 1. Like,
I don't even remember in episode 1. That's probably my issue.
Oh yeah, they when the tracksuit guys first break in, you hear one guy saying, like, look, find the watch, everything else is, like, superb. Like, you can steal other stuff, but we got to find the watch. And then when we go out to the guy who's throwing the bags into the truck, and the horrible person who kicks the dog in the face.
That's right. He puts on the watch.
Yeah, he grabs the watch. He's I found the watch, bro. You know?
Yeah. Oh, I know. Trust me, I know who that guy is, and I'm not a fan of him personally. Let's just say that. So I know exactly who you're talking about, especially when you throw bro in there. And Pat would be the other person who kind of knows what I'm talking about. We won't go into that because it has nothing to do with the episode. But okay, I had forgotten about the watch.
The question would be, because it's obviously Maya who wants them to get the watch. Mm-hmm. Why did she want that watch in her search for Ronan?
Yeah.
So is that his watch? Is that somebody else's watch that she thought could lead her to Ronan?
Right.
Because it didn't look like she started taking notes on Clint until the whole Clint-Kate issue thing with the suit came up.
Right. So hopefully, because you just have to think, is it Tony's watch that has information on it? Like,
but he said it would reveal someone's identity, so it's got to be somebody who's got a secret identity, alter ego,
right? So
maybe retired.
I think this is where it's going to come up to be a little bit of the problems or concerns that I have, which were primarily the concerns and problems I had with Falcon and Winter Soldier, but differently. Because Falcon and Winter Soldier fell apart completely on all story aspects. I don't think that Hawkeye's failing story-wise. It's done enough mystery. We've got 3 episodes left. We got 2 episodes left. 5 and 6. I think for the most part, the central mystery it's setting up, I think it may reach satisfactory levels and with maybe a few drop points where they might rush it or something like that. But I think ultimately the difference between it and Falcon Winter Soldier was Falcon and Winter Soldier failed to tell the compelling story it wanted to tell. And I think like this will succeed with maybe some faults that will have to kind of.
Well, some of it, I don't know if they're just going to leave as because this is going to be a passing of the torch miniseries where Jeremy Renner, Hawkeye, is going to step back, and Kate Bishop, Hawkeye, is going to step forward. And then going forward in the films and whatever, we're going to see her and not him. Like, it's going to be his final sort of, we get to see him, he's going to retire, or like, I'll be your mentor, and maybe he'll show up in like another sort of Avengers thing, but it's going to be her, you know, and he's going to retire and be with his kids on the farm and not have aching knees and hurting back and, you know, all that.
Taping frozen vegetables all over his body.
Well, those were frozen drinks.
That too. That's right. But yeah, that's like I agree. I think like a lot of it might be what they're trying to set up for, whether or not they want to do, like you said, like a spin-off Hawkeye show that's focused purely on Kate, or setting up for maybe another show down the road, which is kind of the stuff that we thought about what they were doing with Falcon and Winter Soldier, but with no like season 2 announcement or anything like that. A lot of that stuff was just kind of left out there in the air. Although we got a Captain America 4 coming out at some point that might pick up some of those plot points again, but we didn't have that foreknowledge before. Now, we don't have that foreknowledge here with Hawkeye, but knowing that Kate is a new character that's going to have potential going forward, I think I feel more okay, I guess, is the thing. Like,
well, and knowing that she has been in movies and whatnot before, it doesn't feel like a stretch that they could then have her in a movie. You know, some of the actors, I know when they really wanted, like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. actors to cross over, some of it was just that, like, there really is they feel television versus not movie, you know, this level of acting and whatnot. Not all of them, but some. And it was like, this doesn't seem like a ridiculous stretch that she can go back and forth easily.
Right, absolutely. Well, even like with Yelena, as that's who our mystery mask assailant who shows up. And I mean, as soon as she shows up, it should be very obvious who she is, especially when she starts doing the widow stings.
I think too, like you said, there's a good compliment to Echo there, in that he automatically thinks he's fighting Maya, so she's good. Like to like reference her ability, she's good enough that he thought she was fighting her, when he's fighting a Black Widow, Yelena.
Right, and so I really kind of like that, but also my fear is, how are they, now that Yelena is here and we've got 2 episodes left, how are we going to wrap up like her last little bit from Black Widow going into this? Like, granted, we didn't have much, you know, information wise on motivation in that post-credit scene or what's going to drive her to go after Clint, but now she's here. Can we adequately wrap up a story or an arc in these 2 episodes without it feeling crammed or rushed? And knowing that she is going to be in more of the next episode, that's probably going to be okay. It's probably going to be handled fine. But I just don't want us to also sacrifice, because we barely even mentioned the whole Duquesne thing. You know, like, that seemed to be the central mystery with episode 1 and 2, while also dealing with this Ronin kind of thing. But now the Ronin thing has really taken the step forward, and we've forgotten about Duquesne. We've forgotten about the Bishop family dynamic there a little bit. Can we wrap that all up adequately with episodes 5 and 6? And I think so, as long as they're not 40 minutes and 42 minutes, because
we need some longer.
They need to be 50 minutes, because like, well, I will say again, why these episodes, you know, complement each other is I think they did what they needed to do. They needed to be a little bit more action and a little bit more fast pace, while also planting in some of those bigger plot lines and seeds for how everything's going to wrap up. Those subtle moments, like the phone call and stuff like that, are the moments that you really need to go, okay, that's what's going to play on later on in the final 2 episodes. So again, like, I got that same a little bit of fear of Falcon and Winter Soldier, but I think even if it doesn't accomplish on all of those goals, I'm still enjoying it far more than I was with Falcon and Winter Soldier. Because again, it's not political. It's just a fun story. And that's ultimately something. I saw somebody who's kind of become a clickbaiter YouTuber, and I guess you do that when you hit 1 million subs, and you've got to keep that momentum going and everything. But talking about the ratings on this, now I don't know the ratings, okay? Because now that everything's a streaming service, ratings aren't released to audiences or to news outlets or anything. It's purely up to who runs those streaming services and whether or not they're going to renew a program or not. And since this is a mini-series, they don't have to worry about it. It's 6 episodes, it's done, whatever, move on. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But the YouTuber called this show woke. And I think that because there's a female character, female Hawkeye. And I have to disagree with them. I don't think the show is woke. I don't think the show is trying to push any agenda or any politics or force diversity or anything like that. It is, especially Kate is in the comics, it's something that she's been around for a while. I mean, I guess in the long scheme of things, she's relatively new, but she's liked and she's accepted within the comic book, community. That her showing up in this show is not like it's a forced political agenda or anything like that. It doesn't feel like I'm being lectured to, because she's good, but we've seen that what she's good at is counterbalanced by everything she's bad at, and that he is trying to get across to her that you have to consider this, you have to think about this, you got to think about coming back to your apartment. Oh, no one saw you, but your name is on the, and you came back there earlier in the day. So like, those things that she doesn't think about. And it's not gender based or anything like that. It's what anyone who's a secret agent is used to and trying to convey to someone else who wants to take those things. So they were talking about the ratings being pretty terrible for this, but for the most part, I've seen a lot of people talking about it. Everyone's doing their own little YouTube or podcast reviews like we are. And from what I've seen, most people are enjoying the show. Now, Falcon and Winter Soldier, I think our biggest thing was it did feel forced politically, and it did feel like it was trying to push some type of agenda and lecture people. And, okay, so if you want to call this show woke, well, at least it's not lecturing. It's not... It's not telling me I'm a bad person because of my gender or anything like that. It's just, hey, we got this fun, campy story. We got these two characters, one who most people don't take seriously. Let's shine a light on them and show how badass they are or how badass they can be and have fun with it, because it's absolutely fun. Again, go back to the ball pit. Like, I wouldn't have thought I would have seen something like that necessarily in an MCU show or even in a movie, but it was fun. And again, because they played it so straight, like they played that scene seriously, and that's what led to it being so comedic and so fun. And the fight scenes between Maya and Hawkeye, like, okay, she's good, but only good enough to really stand toe to toe with him. She's not better than him, and again, they do enough, more than they ever did for Carol Danvers, in establishing a character for her.
Right.
They showed the adversity that she had in school. And what I loved most about her first scene as a young child, when the teacher's talking, and obviously she doesn't have her hearing aids or anything like that, because as she tells Clint not to rely on technology, because, she notices the hearing aid, he can only do basic signing. But then, we also see the scene of her watching the combatants, the karate kids, and learning all the different moves on how they could get beat and how to take someone who's twice her size down easily. And then we jump forward, we see the prosthetic, we see her taking on grown men. And that's more character development and character setup than Carol Danvers got in a whole movie. Go ahead.
I like that she also uses the leg to her advantage in the fight with Clint. And you hit hit the
And
leg.
he's like,
you know,
huh?
it's not like it's not presented as she can't do anything. She
Right.
obviously can, and she uses it to her advantage. Like you use all of your perfections and imperfections to the best of your ability.
Right.
You know, and that's what makes a good character.
And it had nothing to do with the fact that she's a woman. Like, you know, it's not. It's just they show how she earned those skills, how she is so good at what she does. Whereas, like, again, harp on Carol Danvers, she just was good. You know, no matter what, she was just perfect. So when it comes to being like super woke and stuff like that, I don't really see it.
Yeah,
They're doing
I don't
their
see
best.
it for this one. I feel like the stretch is to say, oh, we're doing a female Hawkeye when
Right.
Kate's, like you said, a very established character in the comics. And then maybe it's the wokeness with casting a deaf actress for Maya, but that kind of just seems a little stupid because the character's deaf, so why...
Well, no,
Why would
see,
you
I'm not
not
even familiar
look for a
with.
deaf
I'm not even
character?
familiar with the character of Echo a whole lot. Because I don't know how new or not new she actually is, but you know, yeah, I think that's like I'm not gonna die on a hill and say that no, you know, non-deaf actors should play deaf characters,
Yeah.
but I also at the same time you get a deaf actress and you get one who has never done anything really before, and you get someone who is this actress and she does an amazing job.
She's really
like,
good,
you
yeah.
wouldn't believe she couldn't act or she hasn't acted before.
Right, and I don't know if it's any reference for anyone out there, but I have watched other shows that specifically have deaf actors in them, and you know, so for me, this isn't anything new of like watching and like
Right.
watching them sign
Yeah.
and things like that. So I don't know if that like throws anybody off who's not used to watching
Shouldn't.
anything like that or something. I'm like, it shouldn't. There should be no, but I don't know if they're really stretching for that as wokeness.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
Because this show, like, again, it really harping on Falcon and Winter Soldier, but like in comparison to the wokeness level, this is like nothing. This is like zero.
It's pretty much non-existent.
Yeah,
you know,
I don't really know. This to me definitely feels like you said clickbaity, and this is like what I talk about when I say shock jock.
Yeah.
Because they just want your attention. They're not trying to do like what we try to do the bad and the good, be a critic, not a cynic. Yeah, it's really just about I got to get those views and got to keep in the AdSense and whatever so I can keep making my money, and you know, it doesn't really feel like about what you started for back when you had 0 followers.
Well, and
Zero subscribers.
I'll even counter that with those kind of shock jocks taking a victory lap that the Netflix Cowboy Bebop show was canceled.
Oh.
Now, because everyone was harping on, oh, it's woke. Oh, they, you know, wouldn't have, you know, Faye dressed in skimpy clothing, and they didn't like the actress who was cast as Faye, and they're pushing this, and they're pushing that, and they're pushing this and that. And I've watched like the first 3 episodes. I've watched the anime, love the anime, and I watched it, and I'm like, it's not great from a perspective of being an adaptation of an anime.
Yeah.
But a lot of the complaints that people were having, again, it's a lot of those preconceived notions or biases where it's like, well, because they changed X, it's irrevocably ruined. You know, it's like you got to understand it's a different medium. They're trying different things. They want to be faithful, but also make reasonable changes. And I'm sorry, a woman in a skimpy top and like very skimpy shorts. I mean, yeah, it looks good in an anime, but not necessarily in practicality in a live action
so much
show.
That looks good in an anime, but not in live action.
Right. And, well,
like that's probably to me, I think the most difficult thing to bring to live action is a really good anime.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you can do so much with 2D animation, with 3D animation, you know, hand drawn.
Yeah.
You can do so much with that. And then you try to have to make a physical, actual thing for live action for a lot of stuff, whether it's just the art design, the set design, like you were talking about, the costume design, it'll look fantastic at a 2D animated thing, but then you try and have a real person and it just looks ridiculous. Like,
they're going to adapt One Piece as a live action, and that one is going to be, I'm going to call it now, and it's not because of, actually, although I don't see the person that they cast as Zorro. I don't know if he just doesn't look like a Zorro to me, but everyone else that they cast I think is fine. I don't have any issues, but it's like Luffy is Mr. Fantastic on steroids. Like, the dude can turn himself into a big giant balloon. How are you going to adapt that to live action? So I'm already expecting the One Piece anime live action anime adaptation to fail because of that, and not because of they cast different ethnicities, and because God, I'm blanking on his name. Okada, I believe, is the writer on it, or of the original anime. He had envisioned each of the different characters from different continents and countries. I'm trying to think. Was it Luffy was like from Brazil? Zoro's from Japan. I know Frankie is from like the U.S. because he's a big giant kind of like half human robot. And then he had all of these different ideas of what country each individual character represented, and that's what they were doing with their casting. But people obviously will like attack it for being that woke level, and I think it's just got to be a thing of reason your expectations. It's got to understand, again, that adaptation of 2D, and even looking at that perspective of a comic book, you're adapting 2D art to the big screen, and or even to the little screen with the MCU shows, and that's why you don't see some of the classic costumes, because they don't look great. I mean, they managed to do it for Scarlet Witch. They could probably get away with it for Hawkeye. I'm hoping to see maybe some form of that costume.
Well, I think with the picture, we're going to see some form of costume, especially when they spent that time in the apartment with the LARPers talking about getting materials for costumes and stuff. And I think we'll see this. I'm pointing as if you all can see. I don't know, which way do I need to point to, maybe this way?
Nope, that way. The other way.
The other way? Yeah. This way?
Yep, there you go.
To the picture. The middle.
But yeah, because the only costuming thing that I will berate anybody on is the alternate ending to Wolverine, when he gets on the jet, he gets a suitcase, he opens up the case, and it's the actual Wolverine costume from the comic books, helmet and all. And the reason they didn't go with that ending was it's like 60 or 70% of the test audience didn't know that costume.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, I condemn you all to purgatory for not knowing that costume.
That is a thing, though, when you're doing movies and you need to cast a wide net to make as much money as possible. It's easy for us in our little chamber of but I know, and my friends all know, to think of okay, out of 10 people, 3 of us know, 7 don't, to really try and have more perspective of far more people who don't know than do.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, so it's one of those things, you've always got to make those considerations. I think Hawkeye has done a good job of giving Clint due justice for a story outside of just being the archer in basically a background character.
Almost cropped out of the poster.
Yeah, and then also passing that torch on, because we've already kind of have gotten the inklings that they're maybe setting up a Young Avengers either movie or show, which I think everyone would be on board to watch. And this is how you do it. You do those passing of the torch. You introduce these new characters. You may not like them. You may not latch on to them. But just because Kate is a female doesn't mean it's woke. It doesn't mean they're going off with the males. There they go. No more. Goodbye, Clint. Bye. You're meaningless and you're nothing. It's the same thing that kind of comes along with Thor. What's the name? Love and Thunder. A lot of people are not happy with the whole Jane Foster, taking on the Thor mantle. But I read that run, and
I just want to see how they do it for the big screen. That's what I want to see.
And, they want to claim that that's going to be woke and blah, 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 blah. But it's Thor's not going away right now. Thor is still Thor. She just happens to wield the hammer, and that's always been a thing with the hammer is whosoever holds,
What was the green guy, the alien? And he was Thor. He had the hammer.
Oh, well, now there's Beta Ray Bill.
Is that who I'm thinking of?
He's not
I
green,
can't remember.
though. But, well, then there's...
I don't know. There's somebody else I'm thinking.
You're thinking of
I don't
the
know.
Frog Thor, right?
Well, there was Frog Thor. Maybe I'm thinking of Beta Ray Bill and I'm just making him green in my head.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I was thinking of somebody from one of the cartoons. Not the oldest of the cartoons, but fairly old.
Yeah, but Beta Ray Bill was one.
Many people have had, like you said, the hammer and been the power of Thor.
Right. Well, I mean, and even Cap lifted it, So
right.
it's one of those things where it's like, I get we're in a highly charged political society right now, but you just try to separate it. I'll agree with you when I feel like those things are being like bludgeoning you over the head in entertainment, and I agree it has no place in entertainment, but it's not happening in this show. It really isn't.
But to keep us from derailing really, really long time on politics, I just have a couple of thoughts for the show overall.
Get us back
before
on
we
track.
Before we get to scoring, I just wanted to, having watched the 4 episodes of this now and just thinking, on Jeremy Renner's character of Hawkeye in the MCU as we've seen, taking aside everything else. I personally really like his character, the way that they've gone. Yes, I felt like he hasn't had enough time in a lot of the movies, but I feel like, when we get to like Age of Ultron, right from there, when he's talking to Wanda, we really get to see that he has a very like fatherly, mentory aspect in his personality already. Like he already goes ahead and like advises Wanda, kind of takes her under the wing sort of a thing. Like, it's already established that he's that kind of guy. Even back, if we want to go to Avengers and, when he made the call to not shoot Natasha, talking about that. Like, he already has this in his personality of, like, yes, he's a weapon and they pointed him at stuff, but he obviously has enough agency and thought of, like, self-respect or whatever to not always just do what he's told.
Right.
So one of the heartbreaking things is seeing him being so guilt-ridden, thinking about, like, I'm not a role model, I've killed all these people, things like that, when you're like, but you are, like, a good person, you do think about things, you have made decisions, But I do like seeing his kind of character, because when we think about the context of, like, all just, like, the original Avengers, we got Tony's, like, every freaking where with his personality, and Cap is, like, definitely the fish out of water and old, but starting to come to new. Hawkeye is like the steady human element, just like a steady good person, thinks about things, So I like that he's already had the establishment of kind of being a mentor already in that very fatherly sort of way, so that it feels really natural at this point from his story as we've seen it in the MCU to be like, you know what, I'm getting up there. My kids, however old Nathaniel is, like, he wants to be there maybe more, for, I don't know, does Lila look like she's, and Cooper, they're teenagers at least?
Yeah, I'd say like 15, 16, somewhere around that range.
He's already lost 5 years with his entire family and just got them back. That it really does feel like a natural spot in his character's story arc to be like, this is where I care about this person because she's in trouble. I want to get her out of the trouble. It's trouble I feel like I've caused because of the Ronin suit. Mm-hmm. I'm going to mentor her through this arc. And then I'm going to slowly take the steps backwards. And she's going to go forward. This is going to be my protege to go on and be Hawkeye. Like, for his arc, if you kind of step back and just look at the whole thing, the 30,000 foot view, it feels really on character for him. It doesn't feel like it's coming out of the blue,
right,
or like we're just pushing him to the side or anything like that. Like, if that's pretty much what happens, and then we really only see him in cameos for, like, we've got to call every freaking Avenger that ever lived, whenever the next big bad comes in and we see him there, I would be fine with that, because I feel like his story will be satisfied, for an ending. I'll say right now, I won't like it if Yelena does end up killing him in this. Like, but as far as just his character and, like, that big 30,000 foot view, I feel like it's it's on character. It makes sense. You know, it's a good way to wrap up. It's a good way to transition out the old actors with the new actors.
Right.
Like, nothing about it feels wokey or pushed or forced or like, well, it's time to just get rid of this person, or this person decided their contract's over and they're not coming back. You know, there's nothing about this that feels that way to me.
Well, I want to hit on a couple points you made there that I think, one, I don't think Yelena is going to kill him.
I don't think so, but if they want to do a turn, I don't want it to be that.
I think what's going to happen is they're going to get into a moment, and she's going to, obviously make the claim, well, you killed my sister, and he's going to explain how Nat saved him, and brought his family back and sacrificed herself, and that will ultimately, hopefully, win her over. As for also that whole thing from the whole kind of self-doubt angle, I think by the end of it, Kate is going to revive that bit of hope back into him as well, where, you are a role model, you are a teacher, you are a mentor, you are a good person, just because of her, again, from her bubbly optimism, and, and trying to, because again, it's his guilt. It's his guilt of being Ronin for 5 years that is ultimately driving kind of his character motivation, and it's only going on this adventure with Kate that he's getting really back to the Clint he was before Endgame, or before Infinity War, or whatever you wanna say.
Yeah, Infinity.
So it is. I think it's going to end well. I'm really excited for the final 2 episodes. I don't feel like anything's being pushed. I don't feel like someone's, holding, a gun to their head and going, okay, you have to phase out these characters because, we need to fit this forced diversity or anything like that. I think they're doing what they're doing best, and they're telling good stories. And they're doing those things where they're, like you said, when you put it in that perspective of his character arc throughout the films, it really does make sense, and it does work. Because how many times is he going to, leave his family? We talked about the conversation with Nate, and how heartbroken he was. One, not to be able to hear his son's voice, but also trying to comfort his son, and his son being like, yeah, we get it. Like, we understand if you can't, come home, like, it's okay. And, if you're a father, and I'm not a father or anything, but it's gotta hurt to hear that from your own son, that it's okay. They understand if you can't come home for Christmas, Yeah. So,
and because Kate gets to experience that too, when they're having that chat, and she decides that she's going to go, like, have a little Christmas cheer with him.
Yeah.
Then we have that little Christmas party sort of a scene, Yeah,
it's just, it's really hitting on those themes of family, of regret, of guilt, and the past. And so, yeah, I'm really excited. Again, like, that's the difference between this and Falcon and Winter Soldier, that, where we were concerned with plot points and storylines, because it wasn't even the central story itself was just not compelling enough to really for us to overlook those faults. Whereas, okay, they may not be able to wrap up everything perfectly with a Christmas bow, but it's going to still end in a way that I'm going to be like, I could easily watch this again. Whereas Falcon and Winter Soldier, I think it's going to be I guess I'm going to sit down and watch Falcon and Winter Soldier. I
might never watch it again.
Yeah, I really have no, other than, like, I'd like to see Sam in the suit again. Like, I have no real compulsion to go, yeah, I want to revisit it. Maybe I will down the road, especially the further we get away, like, as soon as things kind of quiet down on the political front out in the real world and stuff, I might be able to then reevaluate it at a later time, much like I did with Captain Marvel. Even though I still have my strong dislikes about the film, when I revisited
not there yet.
Right. Well, when I revisited it later, and did a second review, well before you started joining the podcast, I was like, okay, it wasn't as bad as my initial reaction. So the further we get away from the kind of charged times that those things come out, the easier they are to digest and watch. But let's go ahead and wrap this up and give our scores for episodes 3 and 4, unless you want to do one total score, since we kind of viewed it as one.
Well, I think we did a total score last time,
did
too.
We?
So,
okay.
Yeah. I would land on a 4 for these.
Mm-hmm.
Just a solid 4. I don't feel outstanding, just because it's the middle. It's
right.
the plateau.
Right. We're gonna go down that hill in the next 2.
Right. So I feel like a solid 4 is a good spot for them to be in.
That's probably what I give it to. Like I can't go any higher. I can't go any lower. You know, there are those things that I have some concerns about, but again, I think it's going to do its best to try to wrap up all those little plot lines and mysteries. And even if it doesn't, I think it's still going to do a fine job finishing Clint's story and showing us where Kate's going to go in the future. Yeah. So I think that's going to do it for this week's episode of the podcast. Of course, I forgot to do our little beginning spiel about commenting, sharing, subscribing. All that wonderful stuff that every YouTuber asks their audience to do.
If you want to argue with us,
yes,
we'll put it
feel
up
free
here.
to argue with us. Also, we do now pretty much. I've determined that we do live stream some video game content for now. We've had some stuff in the works about what we might do outside of just video games. I know at some point we would like to do maybe a once a week live podcast episode, primarily more for bigger release films that we want to cover for the show, and if everyone's schedule kind of lends to it. So we'll see what that happens. But
that's the hardest part.
Absolutely. We are live streaming though regularly, because it's pretty much just me and someone who may want to join, like Pat or Johnny, from Saturdays 8 to 10, usually game streams. We're supposed to be getting back to House of Ashes, but there's been some scheduling snafus there, so I'll find some random game. I've got plenty that I've gotten on some Steam sales, so come check us out. Join us in the chat. It's always fun to engage with everyone, whether they're in the chat or on the stream. So, and then, of course, as always, follow us on any of our social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff's going to be in the comments below. Or in the description below, rather. And you can write into the podcast at criticsnotcynics@gmail.com. Audio, obviously, we're on Podbean, iTunes, SoundCloud. All that stuff's going to be in the description below. And we will talk to you guys next time.